Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze with the Freedom Cell Network, and today I'm going to talk to you about another idea on how you can use freedom cells to get involved in your community and in your own life to use the power of decentralization and localization. I want to remind you guys, if you have not, please go to freedomcells.org, create an account on here. This is an alternative social network that allows you to search on our map to find individuals within 5 miles of you, 10 miles, 50 miles of you, however you like, to find others who are interested to create cells or circles, whatever name you want to call them, for many different purposes. And you can go here, you can create an account, you can create a profile. You can also see some of our past videos where I actually tell you how to use this website in depth. So look for those past videos if you want to get caught up. They are all, most of them can be found right here on the website. Today though, we're talking about peaceful parenting and how Freedom Cells applies to the concept of peaceful parenting, and just some ideas on that whole process. For those who are unfamiliar with the concept of peaceful parenting, I want to invite you to visit theconsciousresistance.com, our other website, and search peaceful parenting, and you will get a return of a number of interviews, majority conducted by our friend Peaceful Anarchism, and essays, Peaceful Parenting Breaks the Cycle of Violence, something from Katie Chaos, and just lots of different interviews talking about it, including this podcast right here, the Non-Aggression Parenting Podcast, introduction, and can break that whole thing down. You can also check out the website Everything Voluntary, voluntarist website, everythingvoluntary.com/parenting, and has an introduction to peaceful parenting here with a set of essays, which I guess are section 5 from the book Everything Voluntary from Politics to Parenting, and introduces the philosophy of peaceful, respectful, effective parenting. One of them is called Natural Born Bullies. The next is called Childhood, the Unexplored Source of Knowledge. Third is Why Do We Hurt Our Children? The fourth, On Seeing Children as Cute. And this one, 10 Ways We Misunderstand Children. And finally, Raising Children Compassionately by Marshall Rosenberg, which is one I want to talk about for a moment because some of you may recognize the name or face Marshall Rosenberg, who is the man behind nonviolent communication. Now, these two tools, nonviolent communication and peaceful parenting, are not explicitly anarchist tools or activist tools themselves, but many activists and definitely anarchists, non-statists, anti-government types have started to recognize the value of tools like nonviolent communication. And nonviolent communication is all about, or what's sometimes known as compassionate communication, is all about recognizing that most conflicts arise when an individual feels like their needs are not being met in a discussion. Trying to identify the needs and then from there being able to communicate effectively about those needs, and it really has some powerful effects. And obviously there's more to it than that. You can find our videos on nonviolent communication on our website. But when you start to look into nonviolent communication and you realize, well, if I want to create a better world, then perhaps the way I communicate with people and the way I have my interpersonal relationships is just as important as what I know about politics and economics and philosophy, right? You start to understand that we can create a better world by treating other people better and by respecting ourselves and allowing that to become the norm for the way we have dialogue between individuals, especially with those that we disagree with. Now, when you go from there, when you start to think, okay, well, I'm going to apply compassion to my communications with everyone and try to have consensual, voluntary relationships and just generally give people the basic respect, and maybe you become a parent, well, then the idea tends to apply itself even further, where parents start thinking about what it's like to be an authority figure in a household, or what it's like to be a parent who uses violence against a child, and typically is the case a parent who hits their children, and I mean that, I don't mean, you're abusing them, punching them in the face, but I mean you're hitting them with your hands or with belts or something as a form of punishment that you think is going to be effective in the long term. Typically people who do that were also abused as a child, whether or not they view it as abuse. Plenty of people say, well, I was hit as a child and I turned out fine, and that may be the case, but it's not because of being hit. It's in spite of being hit, you turned out as an okay person, right? So my point here is that when activists and kind of people who are interested in decentralization and self-ownership, when they start talking about nonviolent communication and compassionate communication, and they become parents and think about what's it like to be a parent. Well, you don't want to be this authoritarian figure, right, against you don't want to come in and be the state, be the government, the authoritarian in their life, right? So you want to find a way to have a dialogue with them, to establish respect, to establish communication and partnership and friendship, and that an effective open relationship, because many of us in this world, I think it's quite clear that many of the world's problems could be traced back, at least in part, to troubled parental relationships. Many people who get into drugs and alcohol abuse and then ended up in life of crime, and I mean violent actual crime, and end up going in prison, and just kind of in that cycle, were victims of abuse themselves, either by their parents or other people, and it's a cycle that can be hard to break, right? So when you understand that, and you understand those are the kind of people that are going to go out into the world thinking that violence is okay, thinking that maybe that they won't only justify their own use of violence, but maybe they'll think that the state's use of violence is justified, you start to understand the need to think about parenting differently, right? And this is where ideas like peaceful parenting come in, and really try to challenge those norms of what the parent-child relationship should be like, and how you can raise a respectful but creative, individualistic, empowered human being that is going to question authority, including your own authority, but still, have some respect for you, and really just be a self-motivated learner and things like that. This also gets to ideas like what's sometimes called radical unschooling or unschooling, which Dana Martin, some of you may know. I think we've also got interviews with Dana on this channel as well. She's put out a book called Radical Unschooling, and unschooling and peaceful parenting are fairly connected, I'd say, because it's about parenting styles, and just, again, about being able to connect with kids on a new level that's not coming from an authoritarian standpoint, and empower them, right? So how does this relate to freedom cells? Well, I've talked to a number of friends who are parents over the years, who are part of various activist communities that I run in, and they've said things like, I really wish that we all lived in a community so we could get back to a time and a place where the parents could raise the kids in like a community tribal setting, where instead of just, a mom being, overwhelmed with all the different tasks of being a mother while the father's out doing whatever, or whatever parental roles people choose. Obviously this is individual to individual, but having this bulk of the parent raising, the idea could be, well, if we had a community of members coming together, we could share the burden, right, and help each other and be there for each other, be a support system. And that's what freedom cells are supposed to be. It's supposed to be 7 to 9 people, 7 to 10 people coming together for mutual benefit, for mutual goals, and for various ideas. And of course, we've covered so many in the past. We've talked about how freedom cells could be applied to weather emergencies, places like Standing Rock, defense. We've talked about the freedom cells as knowledge diffuser centers. We've talked about all kinds of different ways, right? So imagine then, if you have your freedom zone, you could have either a freedom cell that takes a number of different interests, because the idea, of course, is going to be applied depending on the people who are involved. So if one group says we're going to be dedicated to just peaceful parents, everybody in our group must be a parent because we have specific needs for parents. So that freedom cell only allows parents to come join them, and they have parent meetups where the kids can all gather and play with each other while they plan out, okay, well, how can we start getting learning skills together, or stockpiling food in case of a weather emergency, or how can we invest in alternative currency, or whatever their interest may be, right? But they're still geared around the idea of raising their kids as peaceful parents, and through unschooling and these kinds of concepts, or whatever they would choose. Then other freedom cells might say, we're just going to be dedicated to permaculture, or we're going to be the ones that focus on local food production systems, what have you, right? The idea is that it could be, it's an unlimited idea that could be applied in any number of ways. So what I'm just imagining is, if you had one core group of parents who are peaceful parents and using this freedom cell idea, and maybe they're localized. So let's say we're here in Houston, and you've got 7 different parents that meet up once a week or every couple weeks as time allows, and their kids play, and they all get together and kind of just track their progress of what their goals are and what knowledge they're trying to gain or what skills they're trying to gain over a period of time, right? And as this core group gains in strength, and maybe also as they're getting connected to more parents, and they're like, hey, I've met a few other parents who I think that might be beneficial to our core group, right? So the concept of freedom cells, though, is instead of letting the group get too big, once it gets to about that 7 or 9 and you have more than that, you split off and you create 2 groups. So then you have 2 different groups that could be specialized. So then you have maybe 2 groups, and maybe one starts out with just 3 or 4 members at first, and the other's got about 7. And as you're adding people that you trust and get to meet that are on the same page. And overall, you're all concerned with peaceful parenting type goals, and there are going to be differences within there. But maybe one specific freedom cell is like, okay, hey, we're going to focus on some ideas for how we as parents can start a garden and get the kids involved in gardening. And then the other freedom cell is going to focus on just different things, right? Like health activities for the kids or something. I don't know. My point is that these different cells could be working on one single topic, but at the same time diffused. And again, the whole goal of the freedom cells, there's not one centralized leader. The power, the knowledge, and the communication is diffused among the group members. And of course, everything is voluntary and consensual without coercion. That's the whole concept behind freedom cells. So this is just yet another example of how the concept of freedom cells could be applied. And as I said, there's an infinite number of ways. We will have a couple more videos coming out in the coming days, including freedom cells applied to food production, defense, and 1 or 2 things. And my point of putting these videos out, which as I said can be found on freedomcells.org, is to show you the amount of ways that this concept can be used. We have a video here called Introducing the Freedom Cell Network that shows me going through the whole website. This is an older one called 10 Tips for Building a Freedom Cell, Freedom Cells Applied to Weather Emergencies, Organizing Against Violent Cops. This talks about freedom cells, and a couple of longer interviews and talks that get into freedom cells. And you can see already people have started cells in different parts of the world and the country. And yeah, the website is kind of slow right now because, well, people aren't coming and joining, but it's a tool that's there for you to use if we choose to use it. Or we can just stay on the old platforms and just keep using them and allowing them to censor us and keep us from really building any sort of movement and actually escaping from the system and creating a parallel system that can rival it, create alternative institutions through peaceful resistance, through mass opting out, through mass opting out and disobedience where possible, civil disobedience or otherwise. So my goal here is to build a world where we can use freedom cells to connect as peaceful parents, as gardeners, as permaculture farmers, as activists, as journalists, as just free human beings, and create a better world by creating a new system entirely with freedom cells as the stepping stones towards that alternative world and towards these alternative institutions. So please, if that idea interests you, check out freedomcells.org and spread the word. Thank you guys for listening. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.